Welcome into the Illini Inquirer Podcast. It's Jeremy Werner and Derek Piper. It is time to take a break with football. We got plenty more football coming up. Joey and I are making our bold predictions. So, Derek, if you want to send some in for that one, we're going to do our bold predictions pod later this week. We got to do an all Big Ten draft, which I probably got to get you in because that was really good 2 years ago. We forgot to do it last year, but we need a football break and talk some basketball. So welcome, Derek. We're glad to have you.
It's good to be here. As much as I'd like to continue to the football talk, maybe do some Caleb Williams. You and I got some of that chatter in at the fantasy draft at Casa de Evans this past weekend. So feeling decent about my team. I know you went quarterback heavy. I sprinkled in a little bit more auction dollars at wide receiver and happy about Derrick Henry. But yeah, no, hoops is always relevant and got a schedule to talk about and some summer workouts that obviously took place.
All right. While we're at Brad Evans' house for our fantasy draft, which is always something to look forward to with your brother Josh there. Brett Barron's now part of the league. It's always good to see Brad and Andy Barron's from Yahoo as well. We had Justin Fields on the TV while that was all happening. And plus we had Caleb Williams earlier in the day to watch. Justin Fields stan, Derek Piper, where are you at right now with the Caleb Justin thing? This much later, getting to see Caleb Williams in a Bears uniform do some pretty cool things.
I'll preface by saying, yes, I was more on the holding on for dear life with Justin Fields as long as I could. Saw the talent, obviously. Did want him in this auction draft. Brad Evans ultimately outbid me. Still wish him success. Still think there's something to tap into with him. But how could you not go full steam ahead with Caleb Williams now? I mean, the clips that have been out there, obviously, it's beyond just training camp stuff that pops up on Twitter. We've had preseason games, flashes in both the games against the Bills, late in the first half against the Bengals. I got to be all in. I'd be an idiot not to be. The talent's there, both in terms of his talent, the talent around him. It's intoxicating. I'm having to, steer myself back to, let's not get too far into, hey, they're going to win the division. Hey, he's going to put up a C.J. Stroud year. He's capable. It could happen, but I'm giddy. I'm really excited, and I'll be willing to admit I was wrong if we do have to go that route, because I remember some spirited Big Ten tournament after hours debates with you, me, and a couple of other guys that I won't out them on this, but I was in the minority of still saying, hey, Fields is the guy. I'm good with him, but man, Caleb looks good.
I can't blame you for your love for Justin Fields. Even late last year, I'm sitting there going, oh, this guy's going to make the decision difficult because there were just certain games against some pretty bad teams, mind you. It's like, we've never seen anybody do that. We've seen Jay Cutler throw the ball around and make some good plays. But our level of quarterback, what is good is just so much different than everybody else, including our boy Joey that just expects it all pro every time, and good for him. But it's just, you see things of what he does and just the intelligence, the processing. He's going to make mistakes because he's a rookie, still adapting to this level, still adapting that he doesn't have to make the special play all the time. So I don't expect C.J. Stroud's stat line at the end of this year. I do expect one of the better quarterback years of our Bears fandom, which isn't a high bar, but he's also got a really good team around. I think this defense can be great. And the fact that Ryan Poles is trying to trade for Matthew Judon, looking at other guys, tells me they could be pretty dang good. I think they're going to be pretty dang good even with a rookie quarterback. So I'm excited. My hope is playoffs, and Caleb Williams looks like he's going to be a future star. I don't expect him to be an elite quarterback right away, but I think he will be eventually. So it's exciting times, Derek, for us Bears fans. I am full of hopium right now.
Can't wait for the season.
All right, Illinois basketball fans, can't wait for this season because, as Brad Underwood said today, this could be his highest ceiling team, and I don't disagree with the premise. Now, he doesn't have an Io DeSumo or Terrence Shannon, proven All-American, or Kofi Coburn on his team, but he certainly has a bunch of NBA prospects and just loaded with team. We talk about, too deep for Illinois basketball. It feels like the second string for this team could have beaten some of the teams we covered initially on this Illinois beat, Derek. But the schedule for the non-conference is out. My wife is happy that we can start putting our schedules together. I'm sure yours is as well. But I'll throw it up here on the screen here soon. But we knew that the highlight would be 5 high major games, 4 against top 15 opponents. That includes the Alabama game in Birmingham, Alabama on Wednesday, November 20th. Alabama will return that to United Center the next season. Arkansas and Kansas City, Missouri on Thanksgiving Day, November 28th. That's a 3:00 tip-off on CBS after our Bears play at the Lions. And then, of course, December 14th, Tennessee comes to State Farm Center, a top 15 opponent. I love seeing these kind of games. Tennessee and Arizona coming to Illinois. Missouri bragging rights game, December 22nd. And then, of course, the Duke game in New York City at another trip to Madison Square Garden for the Illini and the Illini beat. That's a Saturday, February 22nd game. So that means the Big Ten and ACC had to work with these two teams to make it happen. But Cooper Flagg, the number 1 draft pick, most likely in next year's draft, and Illinois going to play him deep into the season. I don't know if that's when you want to get him. But Derek, just overall thoughts on that loaded of a schedule.
It's exciting. Fans got to love it. You got to appreciate the fact that Brad, coming off an Elite Eight, is accepting the challenges now where he can go out and get some of these bigger games, which he spoke to today, that got a lot more appeal. TV networks want to put you on in their prime slots. And he was mentioning like the Madison Square Garden game. I think Brad said it's going to be an 8 p.m. game on a Saturday night. Like, that's prime time level games with a lot of exposure, certainly a lot of eyeballs anytime Duke's on the TV, especially get the number 1 projected overall draft pick and Cooper Flagg involved in that one as well. So I like the aggressiveness. We've talked about it before. It reminds me of Tom Izzo, what he did a lot of years, and I think still continues to do, but in his heyday in particular, when he could reload and have a lot of talent, just go out there and say, hey, we'll play anybody anywhere. You want to play on an aircraft carrier, we'll do that. So to play on Thanksgiving, to know the exposure that game's going to get is great. I think one of the underlining things that I look at in terms of some of the teams that they are playing as far as challenges, Arkansas is going to have a lot of new pieces. Duke's going to have a lot of new pieces. So I think that kind of even further aligns with Illinois, who, of course, have that situation themselves. Now, Alabama could be the biggest game on their schedule, especially if they win it. Now, it's going to be charted up as a neutral. It's really going to be an away game at a home away from home for Bama. But to face a Final Four team that gets Mark Sears back, that gets Grant Nelson back, they add Cliff Amore in the portal. That's the preseason number 2 team. That's what CBS has right now. They could be number 1 when you play that game. They could be number 1 at the end of the year. At least thought to be a top 5 team throughout this season. So you get them, you get Tennessee on the return. That's a good Tennessee team, even though they don't have Dalton Knecht this year. I was just looking at Torvik right before we hopped on. They've got them preseason top 5. I think they're number 4 going into this year as far as the Torvik analytics. So that's a really good team. You hope to use your home court to sell out. I would have full expectation of that. So, and then you sprinkle in, yes, the Chicago States, the Eastern Illinois, those bye games that you expect to win by 30. And I know that when we talk about net rankings, really blowing those teams out can help you. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate the fact that we're going to see Greg Campy again too. Oakland is your 3rd game of the season. No, they're not going to have Jack Golke and Trey Townsend, their 2 best players from last year, a team that beat and upset Kentucky in the first round of the NCAA tournament. But fully expected that's kind of probably more of a competitive mid-major game right before then you go play Bama. And then, of course, Arkansas not too long after that. So you get the challenges, you get the high-end games that really have no downside if you lose them. A lot of opportunity to splash some signature wins on your schedule, and then some of those lower-tier games that you expect to win and win big. So I like the structure of the schedule.
Yeah, Brad's got strategy here, right? Like I'm sorry, Bradley. I'm sorry, Southern Illinois. I'm sorry, Illinois State. You're not going to see those teams anymore because you want these really low net ranking teams. And looking at KenPom, Eastern Illinois last year, 320, SIUE 289, Chicago State 295. You want teams that you can blow out, because that's what matters in your net rankings. And those are all teams that you can blow out. And that's why it's a shame for Bradley fans, Illinois State fans, Southern Illinois fans. I just don't think you're going to see those games against those 100 to 250 teams, because it might be an 11-point win. It might be a scary moment where you can get shocked, like a team like Illinois that's got so many new pieces. Just don't think you're going to see much of that anymore. And then if you're Brad Underwood, you load up on these huge, great opponents, because there is no downside in playing them. There's only upside, even if you only win one of them. right? That's a huge marquee victory, and you're not going to be penalized for not winning those games, unlike if Illinois football plays Missouri, right? So I think it's a great way of doing this. And Derek, you mentioned it. The TV networks are interested in Illinois. Fox is the one that really set up this Illinois Duke game from the sounds of it. And they're reaching out to Illinois now, just like they used to reach out to Michigan State, and CBS wants Illinois and Arkansas. Like, they want Illinois. And that's a great thing on Thanksgiving after the Bears play. Sure, a ton of people are going to go over to what is it, NBC or CBS for the next game? I think it's CBS. NBC's got the night game. Sure, you're going to go to, what would it be, Fox, I guess.
Fox, to watch the Cowboys.
Be Fox to watch the Cowboys. You're going to go over to there, but there's going to be some people that stick with college basketball because they like college basketball maybe a little bit more than the NFL. There's some fans that actually do that. So I think that's great. Alabama game's obviously probably going to be on a major network. I would imagine the Tennessee game could be on an FS1 or something like that. What a great opportunity for this program. And I think it's a great sign that these TV networks want Illinois in these big games, Derek. And it continues to be that way. And Brad Underwood jumping at every opportunity to do that is great. It's great for the brand, and it's great for recruiting. And it's great for the future of Illinois athletics that they have this kind of stage.
Absolutely. All of that, the exposure that you get when you recruit nationally like Illinois does, even internationally, obviously, when you have those opportunities, those are must-watch games. Those are what games that people are talking about when you even might flip into like College Game Day on a given weekend, and they're talking about that Illinois Duke game. That's certainly something that matters, that pops. And I think just to accept those challenges and see if you can continue to just further upgrade your profile nationally is a big deal. And that's something that you love, and you thrive for those opportunities to do that. So you're going to sell that in recruiting, to be on the biggest stages, to play the biggest games. We'll see what, after Illinois cycling through this roster, what that looks like. But I love that Brad's unafraid of that. And it's also something too, I don't know how intentional. I know that Joey asked Brad today about the home and home dynamic versus some of the MTEs or the neutral site games. Brad's reemphasized that he really wants home and homes. He wants to reward the fan base by giving them big matchups in Champaign, even if it is every other year. You obviously were in Knoxville last year to have those games, but neutral sites can be intriguing to tap into different markets, but also like you're going to play the games that matter the most in your season in the NCAA tournament on neutral floors, on NBA courts. So like that stuff matters too, as far as, testing yourselves and kind of doing a trial run. We can all sit there and say like the Arkansas game on Thanksgiving might feel like a Sweet 16 game. The Duke game in MSG could feel like an Elite Eight type of matchup potentially. We'll see where both those teams ultimately are when February goes around. But to throw one aside there, Cooper Flag in February, that could be tough. But Kasparas Shakachonis, Will Riley in February on the other side too. And I'd love we could set an over-under how many NBA scouts in attendance for that game. That's going to be definitely into the teens for sure, I would imagine.
Especially on the East Coast, where a lot of those teams can easily get there. The other note I wanted to mention, on the non-conference schedule, there's a hole between November 28th and December 14th. That's because Illinois will have 2 Big Ten games, especially with that Duke game in February. I'd imagine Illinois has only 1 Big Ten game that week. So they'll have 2 Big Ten games. I would imagine 1 home, 1 away. Doesn't sound like Brad Underwood knows that quite for sure, but that will make we will know what this team is, Derek, by New Year's Day, or we'll know a lot about this team, right? Like, they're still going to progress because there's so many young guys on this team, but they're going to be thoroughly tested, I guess, is the best way to say this, before the real Big Ten season starts in January.
Absolutely. And that's what you want as a coach. You want to find out what your weaknesses are. How do you address those? Who's ready for the moment? And I think with a lot of young guys too, just their progressions, of course, you're going to hit some bumps in the road. And then, as far as cohesion goes, can you ride out some of the adversity, some of the challenging moments if you do take a couple of losses early in the season, and different lineup combinations, finding your identity. You hope you're not in a situation where in years past that Brad has had to adjust his scheme and completely remake some things in some form or fashion. But I do think, and that's kind of the beauty of this season, I feel like, obviously if it goes well, but just the the overall progression and growth of a young team, a lot of inexperience, a lot of new pieces, how they come together. And along the way, they get challenged quite a bit. So they won't be a finished product. Like you said, even by January, although we have a pretty good idea of how they stack up against some of the better competition out there. But just to see that progression will be exciting. And obviously Illinois will hope to, along the way, get at least 1 or 2 wins that really matter for their NCAA profile.
What would be a success in those games? Like, all right, say Missouri, you want to win, right?
So, Missouri, yeah.
Of those 4 games, Alabama, Arkansas, Duke, Tennessee, is 2 the marker, or is it just even 1 in being like close games? Like, I would say if you're Illinois, it's got to be at least 2-2, right? Like, I think that's the bar of what Illinois basketball is now, even though you're playing 4 top 15 teams. And I don't know if you'll be favored like on paper going into the season against any of those, because Illinois kind of picked what, at 20s for most rankings, while all these teams are top 15.
Yeah, I think that when you look at both neutral games, true neutrals, Kansas City and New York, Duke and Arkansas, as I mentioned, very new rosters, talented, but very new rosters. Maybe you split those. You just kind of hypothetically setting the bar. If you get one of those, and then assuming you're probably going to lose at Alabama, that's what I would say. And then while you're at home against Tennessee, maybe they're a higher ranked team. They probably will be, but you're at home, you might lean towards winning that. So maybe a 2-2 split. That's kind of how I get to that and setting the bar. I feel like Brad, if we told him, hey, if you guys win one of those, you'd be all right with that. I know he would push back heavy.
The bar high. He set it high, right?
Yeah, set the bar high. So yeah, I mean, 2-2. I think you'd be fine with that. Obviously, anything better, you'd be over the moon. And 1, you'd be fine, especially if you got to beat Missouri. And then maybe more heavy lifting obviously needs to be done in the Big Ten schedule to get ultimately where you want to go for a seeding standpoint. But 2 wins, especially who you're going against, I mean, those are all 4 of those teams that we're talking about are top 15 teams, as you mentioned on the front end on CBS Sports is top 25 and 1. So that'd be great as far as laying a foundation.
All right, I want to take a minute to tell you about HomeField Apparel, because they are the premium collegiate apparel brand, and they're based in nearby Indianapolis. HomeField sent me a few shirts, and what I love about them is, of course, they have incredibly comfortable, well-fitting shirts, but they also have officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. And they have more than 180 plus available colleges, including, yes, your Illinois Fighting Illini. They have great gear for the upcoming football season, so for the warm weather games, check out their Script Illini t-shirt, the Orange Ringer tee, the vintage Oski Wawa helmet, or for the fall chillier games, check out the Script Illini hoodie, the Flying Illini hoodie, the Flying Illini quarter zip, and if they're still available, you might want to check out homefieldapparel.com for this. Check out their Script Bomber jacket. It is awesome. Also, don't miss their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 campaign. So HomeField is giving away these special football boxes, and these platinum VIP boxes include 3 never-before-seen items from your school that are not available anywhere else. They're curated so fans have new gear to wear all season long, suitable for all weather conditions. And these platinum boxes also include other exclusive items, including a new hat or ringer, a VIP koozie, and a 2024 Platinum Pass, which guarantees 20% off and early access to your school's football releases through the 2024 season. The football boxes are available on August 9th, so these will sell out quick, so go check them out. Go to homefieldapparel.com to check out their great selection of Illini gear and use code Illini24, that's all capitals, Illini24, for 15% off. That's Illini24 for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. All right, for the rest of this podcast, I want to focus, because you wrote a great piece, Derek. I want to focus on the Illini front court. We've talked so much about the backcourt, especially this offseason with Kasparis Yakšonis having such a great offseason with his international play and just the buzz we've heard from him. But this front court is something to be excited about. And in that, I'm going to include Tomislav Ivisic, who's arrived on campus, Morz Johnson, obviously a very highly ranked prospect, one of the highest in Illinois history, Carrie Booth, Notre Dame transfer who's on NBA radars, and not just because his dad is the general manager of the Denver Nuggets, and a guy you and I are both excited about and what he brings, veteran leadership and just the ability to put the ball in the basket. That's Ben Humrickhouse. And you can throw in Ty Rodgers and Trey White, guys who can be young, smaller 4-ball kind of options. And Derek, I'll just start here. What do you make of the collection of talent that they have brought into this front court?
We discussed it earlier in the offseason, gave them a lot of props for the depth they've accumulated in the front court. The fact that Morz obviously has a very defined skill set as being a plus athlete, rebounder, hard-nosed rim runner type. And then the other three can all stretch the floor. Hamrickhouse can really shoot it 40+% from three at Evansville. Carrie Booth's expected to be a legit stretch 4+ shooter. And then Ivisic as that stretch 5, who I know we didn't get a chance to watch him closely. You're judging a lot on highlights and stats and kind of box score watching with him overseas, but shot 40+% from three, albeit on when you crunch the numbers, it's really about 2 attempts per game from three, but still you're talking a 7'1" guy that can pick and pop, that can step out and shoot it. So you've got that floor spacing dynamic, that 3-point shooting, and then obviously Morz, high profile prospect who just bordering right below a 5-star status, played on Team USA, junior national team. So in hearing kind of what the staff thinks of them, getting looks at all those guys, they love that group. They love the fact that they feel like they have 4 guys that legitimately, if they were in the position to do it, which they aren't because they've got to make some tough decisions, but they think that any of those 4 could start at the high major level. Now they're going to have to make some decisions as far as who's going to start, who's going to come off the bench. I do think all 4 of those guys will all play a decent role. We'll see how things vary. Morz is a freshman. How does he go through some of that learning curve and whatnot? I know Ivisic is technically a freshman though, right? Too, because I feel like he's 21 years old, not the age of a freshman, nor the experience, but I think he's technically a freshman.
He is a freshman, but he is not the equal of most freshmen because he's a grown man with some grown man stroke. I do want to bring this up quickly. We keep asking, and Joey in particular is doing a good job of this, about Tomislav Ivisic. He got on campus, right? He's in the university, but it sounds like there's still some amateurism, NCAA getting clearance there. So can you update us there, Derek? Any concern with Tomislav Ivisic?
I don't think so yet. It's always with the NCAA, a process, takes time. I think if we're sitting here instead of late August, it's late October, and we're about to tip the season opener here in a week or so, like if he's still not cleared, then you're going to start to get some angst. You'd like to have an answer here in the meat of the fall, for sure, that he's going to be full go and cleared. We were talking about it before the pod. Admittedly, I don't know what that, and I'll have to maybe see if I can do some digging on it, what that process is like, because I know the essence of it. You're trying to prove he didn't take a salary from the pro team that he was taking part on. Like, I know there's going to be some room and board, some stipends as far as food goes and that kind of thing. But beyond that, obviously you're playing with guys who are making their living for that pro team. Are you taking money as far as that goes? I don't know how it goes in terms of like proving that you didn't, what the NCAA needs to see to make sure that they're like, okay, you're an amateur. Are they checking bank statements and all that kind of stuff? They need like signed stuff from the team saying, hey, we didn't pay him a contract or anything like that. So with the NCAA, there's not a lot of transparency. We're kind of just waiting for an answer. But yeah, we'll have to dig on that a little bit more. But I haven't heard any kind of like, it's not done yet, so maybe it's not going to go through.
There's bureaucracy, right? That takes time sometimes, quicker than it's not as quick as we would like it to be. I would say Tomislav Ivisic is a very important piece of the puzzle of their front court. Not that like Morz Johnson and him are in a competition, right? For starting job, for playing time, but he just gives them something that they don't have. Like, I do think Morz Johnson, who's a rim runner, who's big and strong, who seems to impress. We'll dive into that, Derek. And Carrie Booth, a stretch big, like that is a good duo, but you're lacking kind of that one-on-one guy who can defend some of the bigs you'll see in the Big Ten or on your schedule. Omarui is on the schedule. Ballo obviously is on the schedule at Indiana. Tomislav Ivisic, I don't know if he's the strongest defender, but he's 7'1", 240 pounds, something like that. And he can body up those guys. He can be a rim protector. And that was an issue for Illinois last year when they had Coleman Hawkins. I think Carrie Booth would be more built like Coleman Hawkins, a better help side rim protector than guy who can go one-on-one with these bigger bodies. Morz might be able to go, hold up against those bigger bodies. He's just not as long as Tomislav Ivisic. And then you add the offense, Like Ivisic can stretch the floor. Ivisic can pass the ball really well. So that's what I love about what he brings is it's so different than Morz Johnson, that he's longer than him and can stretch the floor. He's different than Carrie Booth in that he's got more strength. He's a man. Carrie Booth still needs to add a lot of strength there. So he is a really important piece of that puzzle.
Big time. Yeah, 21 years old. I've heard that he's 7'1", 250. We'll see. I know he was initially listed at 230 there on the Fighting Illini roster, but we'll see what the work that Fletch can do here in the coming months. I know they're working on his conditioning. They want him to be able to be more acclimated and playing fast. But certainly, I think the skill level in the half court, in particular on offense, is a big deal. We saw just the floor spacing and how valuable it was with Coleman playing the 5 last year, opening up the paint for other guys. And I know that obviously we've talked about they want to put the ball in Kasparas Shakachonis' hands a lot. I think Will Riley will get opportunities, Kylan Boswell. And for guards to come off screens, which Ivisic has a big frame to set those screens, number one, and come off and Ivisic can pop out for 3 as a pick and pop. And that lane really opens up for guys to get downhill and do their thing. You want to play a little bit of booty ball ISO with Rickhouse, potentially Trey White. I know in talking to Tyler Underwood within the last month, he said that, booty ball might not be a huge factor in our offense. They're still kind of feeling that thing out and seeing what works. But yes, and then also, the passing. It sounds like, you put him top of the key and even just to keep the ball. We know that Coleman was talked about as like a connector piece, a guy that saw the floor, knew that next read, the ball didn't stick, just kept the offense flowing. They feel like Ivisic with his IQ, his feel for the game, we'll do that. We'll do that for them as well. I'll be interested to see what his rebounding impact is. I wrote about this today in my player outlook. I think it's hard, again, kind of hard to judge what translates as far as his stats overseas versus here. In watching some of his game tape, I don't think he's going to be a great rebounder. I think at 7'1", you're naturally going to get some boards. And I'm not saying he's going to be a terrible rebounder by any means, but I think that, playing through contact, upping the strength as much as you can, a little bit more would be great. And then, defensively sitting in drop coverage. He's not very laterally mobile. Like, you don't want him defending a lot in space. Don't expect him to be aggressive in ball screen coverage. But, Coleman sat back and drop, and that was very exploitable for opponents last year. I think Ivisic with more size, length to him, and even some added strength can just provide a wall back there. I don't think he's definitely not an eraser. He put up some shot blocking numbers overseas. He can get some of those, but he is going to be somebody that just with that size in the way will make it harder to finish around the rim.
All right, at the 5, Morz Johnson is the kind of guy that, 4 or 5 years ago would have been the headline edition of an offseason, right? And it just feels like he's kind of been a throw-in when we talk about this new look team because of, one, how long he's been committed and how long we've been talking about him, but also just the excitement of Kylan Boswell and Kasparas and even a Ben Rickhouse and Will Riley, even Ivisic. But this is one of the highest ranked recruits they've ever gotten in the composite rankings era, which goes back to 2003. So after D Brown, basically, AD after D. It is Will Riley and Morz Johnson. Those are your highest ranked guys, both coming in this year, Derek. So it sounds like Morz Johnson's having a pretty good offseason, has impressed people. What are you hearing on him, and what do you project his role to be in this front court?
The buzz has been very palpable here recently. It sounds like he had a stellar offseason. Now, a lot of his summer was not against Tomislav Ivisic. So you think about it, Morz was really the only true center on the roster. Jason Jackson's there. We'll see whether he's going to be a stretch 4 or a slender 5. But Carrie Booth has size. I mean, he's 6'9", 6'10". Rickhouse can play some small ball 5. But still, like, the rebounding with Morz out there, and I'm not trying to take anything away from that, it sounds like it was dominant. Like, he was just all over the glass with his athleticism, his strength. That's who he is. That's who he is. I mean, that's one of his biggest staples of his game, obviously.
And he's shown it at the highest level of competition. Like, playing for Team USA, this guy's getting 12 rebounds in 12 minutes.
Yeah, and double-double machine at Peach Jam his last year in the AAU. EYBL, you're playing against a lot of highly ranked guys. So that's who he's been. But I think that one thing that I've consistently heard in talking to multiple people is, the known strengths, again, athletic profile, rebounding, rim running. It sounds like his feel for the game has encouraged people. Like, you think about a freshman, sometimes things move a little too fast. They make a lot of mistakes. They might not have a great feel for where to be positioning wise and whatnot. It sounds like they've been encouraged, and he's been better in that area than they would have expected. So that certainly would help him get onto the floor more. I think they think he can play, obviously, in ball screens, pick and roll stuff, rim running in transition, use him a little bit in some dribble handoffs. I think that he can, if needed to, maybe dribble into a handoff, has a little bit more perimeter skill than people probably give him credit for. They don't want him shooting a ton of jumpers. They're not going to throw him the ball a bunch on the block and expect him to go to work. They want, putbacks on offensive rebounds, rim runs, hits on pick and rolls, and those type of things. But sounds like I've wrote about this. Like, I've pretty much, since Ivica was added in early May, expected that he would be the starting five. And I still do. I still think that he will. But I think Morz, with how he's played, has gotten a lot of people's attention and will make that a legitimate competition going into the fall.
And what I love about Morz is what I loved about Ty Rodgers coming in. Two guys who I just always think of were like, those are guys who would have played for Tom Izzo 10 years ago, right? Like,
definitely.
It's just they have that motor, that demeanor, and they're not going to try to do too much. It'll be interesting. We'll get into the Ty Rodgers conversation probably in another podcast, but where he goes and how he fits into this new look team. But Morz knows, I got to rebound and play hard. Right? That is his role, and he's going to do it at a very, very high level. And unlike Ty, he's not 6'5", he's 6'8", 6'9", right? With 230 pounds. Like, he is ready for Big Ten play, and a guy that I think in most years before we had Ron Harper and Ace Bailey and Kasparis Yakashionis would have been an all freshman kind of candidate. Maybe he can be if he earns a bigger role than even we're expecting. But I expect him to lead this team in both offensive and defensive rebound percentage. Like that, there's no doubt. And if he averages 20 minutes a game, maybe that is 6-7 rebounds per game. He is capable of that because of just how efficient he is at that. And when you're playing with a guy like Kasparis, he could get a lot of looks at the rim, Derek, and he's an explosive vertical athlete that can finish pretty easily. So I just think what you're going to get, which is weird out of a freshman, but it says a lot about Morz.
For sure. Yeah, it's kind of that self-awareness and carving out that role, which coaches love. The guys will buy into immediately what they're supposed to be, and almost you don't have to like coach them up and say, all right, this is not you. This is not where your spots are. He very much has known that. That's part of being a winning role player and what he's going to bring. And yeah, I mean, 6'9", 230 was his initial listing, and Adam Fletcher posted that he's gained 16 pounds this offseason. So he's certainly packed on some muscle there. I think defensively, he presents a lot of, like, with his mobility and obviously his vertical athleticism, like a guy that can be a rim protector, a guy that can cover a lot of space. I think one of the X factors with him is just going to be fouls. I mean, freshman bigs tend to foul a decent amount. And if that could be something that plagues him with his physicality and just kind of learning and maybe not getting caught up in the intensity of a game or trying too much to challenge a shot that maybe he's already going to go in. I mean, that's just kind of one of the interesting things with freshman bigs. But if he can stay out of foul trouble, he could really push past that 20 minutes per game mark. Will he challenge Ivica on the front end of the season or even at some point during the season for the starting job? Certainly capable of it. But no, like you said on the front end, like it's a value, and it's interesting kind of how to maximize it and plug and play it. Like just the difference in skill set and what each guy brings, just based on what you want to complement the rest of your roster with.
Can I throw two guys who he kind of plays similar to? I'm not saying they're the same. I think these guys are both a little bit longer. We've always made the Moussa Diabate kind of comparison. As a freshman at Michigan, Moussa started 26 games, averaged 25 minutes per game, 9 points, 6 rebounds, about a block, but averaged about 3 fouls in that time. So he did foul a lot. And we've mentioned him on this podcast, Cliff Omarui. He's 6'11". Morz is about 2 inches shorter than that. But his freshman year, 23 games, 6 starts, 15 minutes, 4 points, 4 rebounds, about a block a game. and about 2 fouls in that limited playing time. So I feel like there's a spectrum in there of what he could be. Like Cliff came in a lot more raw than Diabate. Diabate had a way easier path to playing time next to Hunter Dickinson. But Morz has some similarities to those guys, just not quite as long.
I agree with both of those. I know if you're going kind of like maybe big picture comp, he's got some Robert Williams to him too.
Yeah.
There's some of that as well, just the athleticism, rim running, those type of things. But yeah, as far as production goes, it will be dependent. I would look more into, like you said, the rebounding rates. Like if you go into Ken Palm, look at the rebounding, defensive rebounding, offensive rebounding percentages. I'm not saying he can't get 5, 6, depending on the playing time.
Per 40 numbers are interesting. Right. So per 40, I could see Morz Johnson being like a 14, 15 rebound guy. So if he's playing 15 minutes, that's like 5. If he's playing 20, that could be like 6, 7, something like that. Like, he's elite at that.
Definitely. Yeah. He's going to be all over the glass. And I think it'll be obviously going back to the schedule. I mean, early you get Amori in the Alabama game. You get Jonas Adu in the Arkansas game. And then obviously the Big Ten.
Funny you're seeing these guys again, but on different teams.
Yeah. Adu would have been the Tennessee game coming to town. But and then the Big Ten, yeah, Ballo, Vlad Golden.
Yeah.
You get Julian Reese. I think Illinois will like seeing Julian Reese a little bit more this time with Thomas Loff and Morz inside. Although Coleman obviously very valuable to last year's team.
Yeah, Coleman very famously beat Maryland last year. He let everybody know that. The intriguing guy to me is Carrie Booth, because the ceiling on this guy is so interesting. As a stretch big, can shoot it like Coleman, right? Is long and vertically explosive. Just kind of feels like a baby deer out there a little bit with how he's kind of feeling his way out. But there's a ceiling where this guy's going to be an NBA player because of his skill set, because of his length and athleticism. Just how do you feel like he fits this year with Morz, Tomislav, Benham, Rickhouse? Because, this is a guy that could play huge minutes on another team. And right now he kind of looks like one of the first, 4 or 5 pieces off the bench for Illinois, which tells you about Illinois' roster.
I know they like him a lot. Somebody who's a plus athlete. We saw some flashes from him at Notre Dame, some straight line drives. And I think also if you're talking help side defense coming over for a shot block, he's certainly capable of that. Being able to stretch the floor and shoot the 3. It sounds like he shot it pretty well this offseason. So that's been a nice asset as a guy who's viewed as a legit stretch 4. So they want to get him on the court because he helps with that floor spacing. He can be potentially a 35+% 3-point guy, a guy that helps you with your rim protection and just overall athleticism. I would imagine he runs the floor well if they want to play fast up tempo, those type of things. But yeah, no, I think it's a very valid question of just how he fits into the rotation, what that looks like. Because if you're trying to steal some minutes, potentially it's kind of fascinating as you try to figure this whole puzzle piece out. Like if Will Riley is going to establish himself on the wing and play big minutes, then are you going to try to steal some minutes with Ty or Trey White at the 4 to get those guys on the court? Or will you just really go heavy on these 4 guys in the front court that we're talking about? And maybe Carrie has a solidified role at 15 minutes a game, potentially. So I think all of those dynamics and battles obviously still need to push into the fall and play itself out. But I know that they're viewing Carrie as a future NBA player, more of when than if in their mind. And I think more likely probably 2 years. Probably, he comes back after this year. They would expect him to be a big piece on that team and who he would have developed into by then with his body and just overall growth. But working with Orlando Antigua, working on his body with Fletch, they've been very encouraged by the progress he's made so far being in their program for a few months.
And you make a great point of how much they want to play Trey White at the 4 or Ty Rodgers if they want to go small and buy some minutes that way. That'll probably determine a lot about how much Carrie Booth gets playing time. But one guy I think you and I have felt strongly about is Benham Rickhouse, just because, even though he's coming up from a lower level for the second straight year, going from D2 to to the Missouri Valley and now going to the Big Ten. It's just his skill set translates. He's 6'9" with a ridiculous quick release, accurate 40+% 3-point shooter. That usually translates really well, especially now that defenses are going to be focused on trying to stop Kasparas Yakashonis and some of these other really, really good players, Will Riley, Kylan Boswell. So I think we've kind of gone back and forth because there's been hype for Trey White. There's hype for Will Riley. There's hype for these other guys. I just still think Ben Humrichhouse's floor is one of the highest on the team. And I feel like him, Kasparas, Kylan Boswell are as good a bets to score double-digit points as anybody. Like those would be my top three. Then you get into the question of Ivisic and Will Riley and Trey White and some of these other guys. I just think that skill set translates, and it's a skill set that is very needed. I still think Derek Key's a starter and a 25-minute-a-game guy. Am I wrong?
I don't think you're wrong. No, I'm all in on that as well. Like you said, there's been, depending on when you're kind of doing your temperature read, there's been different guys that have gotten the play as far as the hype. And on the front end of the summer, it was like Trey White looks as good as anybody on the floor. He's been our best guy in workouts the first few weeks. Obviously, Will Riley's arrival was highly anticipated, and his ceiling is very, very high. You know, obviously mid first round type of projections on ESPN, and that's where he could potentially land. But it sounds like what I was told, as things really heated up and they played a lot of 5-on-5 and guys got settled in the summer, like Humrichhouse probably the most consistent day in and day out, knew what you're going to get. And that was a big time 3-point shooter, guy that can shoot off a movement, catch and shoot. He's elite. And then has some versatility too to maybe play in some mid-post action, to dribble a little bit on the perimeter and break a guy down if he gets to switch under like a lumbering 5-man, that type of thing. Defensively, I think also is something now it's where he's going to guard. I think that if you're asking him to defend on the perimeter in space, especially against a 4, say, who can drive it, I wouldn't love that. I wouldn't love what that looks like. They like him mid-post and in. I feel like his physicality, his size at 6'9", he's a smart defender. They think he's a good help defender. They've really liked that about him, is that kind of as he evaluates, and it will be matchup based. If he's facing somebody that maybe isn't a threat to shoot the 3, he's going to cheat off and be able to help in the lane on some drives and those type of things. But I think they just view him, you know, he's 22 years old, played a lot of basketball. No, not at this level, but just really good instincts, plays like a veteran, and then just shoots the cover off of it, which, yeah. I mean, and I wrote this in my player outlook on him. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be, you know, a guarantee every cycle, but if you look at the guys that came from the Valley last year to the Big Ten, they all clicked. Like they all put up pretty much reasonably in line with what they did in the Valley. They then came to the Big Ten and did. I'm not saying he's going to score 15 a game, but I do think he'll shoot around 40% from 3 as he did at Evansville last year. You look at, Damask, Rink Mast, Lance Jones, and Ben Krikke at Iowa. All 4 guys coming from the Valley. All 4 guys started every game for their respective teams and played well. So I think that's where my expectation lies for Humrichhouse as well.
And I think the more excited I get about Kasparas, the more excited I get about Ben, because he's going to benefit from Kasparas' vision, reversing the ball. I think Ben Humrichhouse is going to be one of those guys sitting there wide open for a 3, and that's going to be big for him. I think it is worth bringing this up, Derek. Like Coleman Hawkins was an all Big Ten caliber player last year. At times, Quincy Guerrier, especially before January, maybe right before February, was an all Big Ten kind of candidate, and then just didn't end the season all that well. And Dane Danger played incredibly well late in the season, but Luke Goody was part of that, front court rotation. Amani Hansberry at times was part of that. What are the strengths of this group compared to last year, and what are the drawbacks that maybe last year's group would have had on this front court?
I think this group has a little bit more depth. Obviously, you're talking about 4 legit guys. Now, individual talent-wise, like Dane was a good player, but did have some limitations. Obviously, Coleman and Quincy certainly were really good for you last year. They were your leading rebounders, both guys over 6 per game, both guys shooting mid to high 30s from 3 as far as percentage-wise. So you could make an argument and say, based if Humrichhouse really thrives from 3, if Carrie ups his 3-point percentage, Ivisic, maybe there's a little bit more shooting, although that might be hard to say because, Coleman shot 4.5 per game at a pretty good rate. Quincy, I don't know what his per game ultimately were, but I mean, he was a career best three-point percentage
Shot
for
it off
him.
three or four a game and shot 37%.
Yeah. I definitely think rim protection, and I think a lot of times people think of that and it's translating to shot blocking. Not necessarily. I just think the way they can contest around the basket and make people have a harder time, whether via post up or on drives. Like, it was just too easy to score on Illinois at the rim last year. They had some real issues, very well documented with facing some big post up players. And then also just some straight line drives, which some of that was the perimeter defense not cutting off driving lanes. But whether it's going to be the 5 spot with Morz and Avicic, or the 4 with some legit, 6'9", 6'10" between Rickhouse and Carrie Booth, I think that helps you as far as that goes. One thing I would flip the coin on and say last year, I mean, experience.
Yep.
I mean, Coleman Hawkins played 4 years of high major basketball. Quincy Guerrier, 5 years of high major basketball. Dane Danger was in his fourth year. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So you've got guys that have not only played a lot of basketball, but been at that level, while Rickhouse is 22 and Avicic is 21. Both guys have never seen the Big Ten before, high major level. And then obviously got some younger bucks and Carrie, who played some in the ACC last year, and Morz was a freshman. So that's one thing that's different. And obviously you could apply that throughout Illinois' entire roster this year versus last year.
Yeah, I just thought that was a great exercise. Great job breaking that down. It's kind of what I was thinking, but it's just like, yeah, like this year is exciting because you got all these new pieces, a little bit longer, maybe deeper group. But last year you knew what those guys were, right? And that's what's so interesting about this team is you don't know what they are. And there's many options, and the competition is going to be fun. And just the process of watching these guys, it's just going to be a little bit more up and down. Like, we just know that's going to be the case. But the one thing is, Derek, this looks like a Big Ten front court, right?
It does.
I mean, you look at these players. It said Avicic, 7'1", 250 pounds, and that's legit. Morz Johnson, 6'9", up to 240 now, something like that. And then you got Rickhouse, 6'9", 220. Like, he is big for such a skilled player. And then Carrie Booth is so long, so vertically explosive, 6'10", 203. He's slender, but that's what a power 4 high major front court that's a top 25 team looks like. And that's the thing. You watch Illinois coming to gyms now, and they pass the eye test, man.
Looked the part for sure. Don't have it on. I think Carrie now probably in that 215. I don't know if he's up to 220. We'll have to see what ultimately the update is, but had heard that similar to Morz, packed on double-digit pounds as he progressed his body. So that's encouraging as well. But yeah, I mean, Michigan State always had deep front courts too. Like, I know we often find ourselves saying this parallels between old Tom Izzo teams, but that's also a big deal is not only having the guys on the front, the front line and your starting 5, but just reinforcements off the bench and be able to do different things with them. One thing I wrote about in the update is because of the shooting and the skill, like, the staff is thinking, how do we play Ben and Carrie together? Like, a little bit more. Is that playing a bigger lineup and you're plugging in a 5 with those guys, or you're playing maybe Carrie at the 5 and Rickhouse at the 4? So those are things that's going to be really interesting to experiment with. As far as upside goes, can we ask this because we teased it at the front end? Do you buy Brad Underwood saying this team has the most upside of any squad he's ever had?
Sure, in that it could potentially make a Final Four. It has the talent to do that. But when you have junior year Ayo Dosunmu and sophomore year Kofi Coburn, I don't know. I thought that team still had that team had national title upside. I don't know if I'm picking this team to even have a chance national title. Like, listen, I think Final Four, like, they could do it, and if you get there, you could win it all. But they have the talent to do those things. But the floor of that team was incredibly high. The floor of this last year's team with Terrence and what Marcus Domask turned into, and Coleman Hawkins and all these old guys, I just think it's going to be a bumpier road. I, for one, are going to have fun watching it because it's all these talented new pieces, but it could end up being 22-10 or 20-12, right? And then they get to a tournament as maybe a 7 or 8 seed, and they do what Arkansas did a couple years ago with all that talent, and they beat a 1 seed and make a Sweet 16. I can see that kind of path. I can also see them being a 3 or 4 seed, just being a really good team throughout the year. I get the highest ceiling, but Io and Kofi, that team was still the highest ceiling team. That team could have won a national championship if they got by Loyola. I truly believe that.
I'm 100% with you on that. I get where Brad's coming from. We talked about it a little bit before we started the pod. Like,
I say that, and Gonzaga and Baylor were just absolute units that year.
The rematch with Baylor would have been tough.
But like, I think they could have beat Gonzaga. Baylor would have been tough, but they had played them. But yeah, that team, if they beat Loyola, I firmly believe they were in a Final Four. So I disagree with that, but I understand the premise of what he's saying. They had the most talent from 1 to 10, by far the most talent they have accrued. It's just they don't have a junior, senior All-American or junior, sophomore All-American returning.
Yeah, you said it there. Well, that team in 21 blended talent and experience, and that team had been together. A lot of those pieces had been together too. I think that's where it factors in. Now, you could say, hey, if we along the way get that cohesion and the talented pieces that we have play up to their potential, I understand the upside argument. We did also discuss before the pod, like this team, and it's been proven, I guess, in terms of mock drafts. We'll see where they land, but they probably have the most talent that the NBA wants of any Brad Underwood team. So that plays into it as well, because you've got potentially 2 one-and-done first-round draft picks, which is something that the program's never had. They have never had one of those. So there's that dynamic of it too. But yeah, I mean, they were a 1 seed. If you just win the games you're supposed to win, you make the Final Four. A lot of people had them in the championship game. You think about expert brackets and whatnot. And last year had a high floor, but also a considerable ceiling too. So
for me, next year's team is the team I think has that highest ceiling, even though you're going to lose probably Kasparis, right? Yep. But if you get one of Kasparis and Will Riley back, you get Tomislava Visic and Morz Johnson back in the front court. You get Kylan Boswell as a senior. You get Ty Rodgers and Trey White as seniors. You get Dre Gibbs Allhorn. We'll see. You get Carrie Booth taking a leap that we think he can be an NBA prospect. That's the year. Like, I feel like maybe you lose a first-round draft pick, but because everybody else gets older, everybody else is together for a year, that to me on paper would feel like the year. Of course, Derek, you can't plan on the next year because you don't know what the portal is going to look like. You don't know what's going to happen. But if you get most of that roster back, including one of those stud freshmen along with Moret, like that's a team I think can go really far and would enter the season with really high Final Four expectations.
Yeah, we've continued to circle back to that potential 2-year window and what it could look like. I do think I would fully imagine, as of right now, that Kasparis would probably be in line to leave after this year. Maybe you can convince Will to stay another year. We'll see what his path looks like as far as the progression goes. But it helps whether you're trying to go out there to the portal and or the international market and get maybe one more piece that you would need, having lost one of those guys potentially, or trying to command them to come back. It helps to have a lot of NIL, which I saw I don't know if you ran into the CBS Sports article where Illinois got a couple of votes for who's got the most money out there in the NIL world. They're not at the top of the list in terms of having the most, but I think when you broke down the voting percentages, they were like a top 10 based on some anonymous poll by coaches. So
I'd rather be on that. I'd rather be on that list than an actual preseason top 10 poll, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
like
right.
that is more important to me, that I have that kind of sway. That people are like, yeah, don't mess with Illinois and their NIL. That's legit.
I'm with you on that. Yeah. So this team does have a high ceiling, and there's a lot of excitement. Can't wait to see how it plays out. But yeah, 2 years, the potential is certainly there. But I don't blame Brad for being, just super excited, jacked up about this team. And if they do reach their ceiling and could be the first Final Four in forever, and we'll see.
Yeah, like I expect Alabama game to be really tough for this team, right? Like I expect Arkansas. I mean, I think that's a toss-up game. Tennessee at home, I think it can be a toss-up game. Like, but man, that Duke game on February 22nd, if Illinois is like a top 20, even 25 team, and you're starting to see the young guys really come into their own, and Kasparis is like a projected top 20 pick, and you're going to play Flag and Duke. Yeah, I'm going, Derek. I'm going to New York.
Doesn't get better than that, does it? Doesn't sound like it. No.
That sounds awful. That sounds like Elite Eight kind of stuff.
Yep. No, I agree. And just great for the program to be back in that position to have, again, TV networks, opponents that want to play you. Don't view it as like, oh, if we lose to them, it's a bad look for us. Like, Duke's got to want to play that game too. You know, you could have found a lot of years where Illinois wanted to play Duke. Like, please give us Duke or North Carolina in the ACC Big Ten Challenge. You know, Duke wants it now.
The one year you get it, it's COVID.
God. Yeah.
Missed our opportunity to get there, and they just kicked their butts too. That was impressive, but yeah. All right, we'll have to do a backcourt wings one because this was fun to kind of break down the front court. But any final thoughts before we get out of here, Derek?
Can't wait for football, man. I know we can dive into hoops.
Do you want to give me a bold prediction? Give me a bold prediction that'll lead into tomorrow. Joey and I are
oh man,
and we're going kind of bold. It's not like something you think for sure is going to happen. It's more like I've thought this could happen, and I don't know if I want to write it down, but I'll spew it on a podcast under bold predictions. That's kind of our process.
See, I'm fighting myself. I've continually gone back and forth on the 5 or 6 win train with Illinois football. I'm not super high ultimately. Now maybe that's going to contradict one of your bold predictions ultimately, you or Joey. I don't know. I feel like I'm letting people down.
You got a player you're high on or something like that?
See, I think with Luke, I'm not the highest on Luke, but I'm not super low on Luke. I did say Dylan Rosiak is a guy that people aren't talking enough about. I think maybe he's someone that's going to be an all Big Ten mix. Hopefully, sure. I think. He led the team in tackles last year, so I
did it as like a sophomore starter, like first real year playing. So I don't disagree with that. Like that could be a sneaky like. Ends up on the all Big Ten second team because he has 100 and something tackles and 5 forced fumbles or something like that. He's going to make a huge impact because they need more takeaways, and he's one of the only proven guys to do it.
I know I'm not doing the whole. I'm supposed to I could fully go first take and make up something that I don't believe and like, oh, Piper said this. The Illinois secondary is going to be the no-fly zone. Like they're actually going to be awesome. How about that?
It's funny because I'm kind of like treating this podcast kind of like, all right, just get out these random thoughts that I don't think are going to happen. And not to like to lie to ourselves. These are things that I could actually have an outside chance of happening. But like, I'm not going to come on the podcast and go, Illinois is going 9-3 because I really just don't believe that. So don't feel bad. It doesn't need to be the hottest take.
Okay.
Yeah. Like one I had just to tease people would be Caden Fagan earns all Big Ten second team honors.
Ooh, I like that.
People know I'm on that hype train. I'm going to continue to hype him. I think he's going to have a monster year. But I got some more for you tomorrow.
All right. Yeah.
If you think of any, you can text me and Joey.
All right. Yeah, I'll come up with something better. I'll workshop that.
All right. Thank you guys for listening to the Illini Inquirer Podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe to us, and hit that notification bell. We really appreciate all your guys' support. For Derek Piper, I'm Jeremy Werner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer Podcast.